The following takes place between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
All right, there you go. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Mo Egger, in for Lance tonight. Sports Talk, off to a late start due to the President's briefing. 700 WLW. I want to get right to my first guest. Obviously, a lot of stuff happening in college sports right now. Different leagues determining whether there's going to be football this fall. Is the season going to be moved to the spring? Is it going to be shelved entirely? The decision was made over the weekend by the Mid-American Conference to postpone all fall sports, at least until the spring. And obviously, that has a direct impact on Miami University. And the tentacles of that decision reach a number of institutions. The University of Cincinnati has games scheduled, or had games scheduled, against both Miami and Western Michigan. I wanted to talk about this with the director of athletics at Miami University, David Sayler, who was nice enough to hang on through the news and the break as we get started. He is with us tonight here on Sports Talk. David, I appreciate the time. How are you?
Hey, it's 2020, Mo. You don't need to say anymore. This is the longest decade I've ever been through in my life, and it's only been 7 months.
You know, it's funny you say that, and I was going to start by asking you, okay, what have the last 48 or so hours been like, talking to your coaches and talking to your athletes? But unfortunately, this is kind of old hat, because you go back to March, you had to inform your basketball programs, no MAC tournament. You had to inform your spring athletes and coaches, no competition. This has got to be getting old. It's getting old as a fan. I'm sure as an administrator, it's getting really old. Walk me through, just with this particular decision, what the last couple of days have been like for you.
Well, we had to do it in January. We canceled 2 basketball games.
Yeah.
We were the first ever school in the United States to cancel any athletic competitions because of COVID situations back in January when we did it. So I've done this 3 times now, but it doesn't get any easier. I would say that a lot of our coaches on my calls, they kind of expected this was a possibility, so it's not like it was completely out of left field. And the hardest part is telling the kids and you don't have answers, because we tried to get other leagues to go with us. I think our commissioner did an unbelievable job at being very open and transparent with other commissioners in the hope that there would be some type of let's figure out how we're going to approach this and move forward as a group. And as you can see by what's happened in the last 12 hours, they can't figure any of that stuff out still. And our presidents just reached a point where they wanted to make a decision and move forward. And at least we could give the kids some certainty. And we're putting all our efforts now into thinking about what spring's going to look like.
All right, let's talk about that. Obviously, you feel like playing football and the other fall sports in the spring is feasible. Walk me through what has to happen beyond the epidemiology part of this. We all know that the main reason that looms over all this is the virus. I'm not asking you to speak to that, but in terms of the practicality, the logistics, and then everything that has to go into having fall sports in the spring, what has to happen?
Well, I think I equated a little bit to what the NBA and NHL are doing, in the sense that they're playing games at 2 in the afternoon, 4, 6, 8 at night. We're going to have games going all days of the week, all hours of the day, and everyone's going to have to be good with that. And I think from a staffing perspective, a lot of people, we're not going to be working as hard in the fall, and game ops, ticket office, things of that nature when you're not having competitions. But then we're going to load up in the spring, and so staff's going to have to be ready to go. We're going to have the indoor facility running, way more hours in the day to get everybody trained and ready. But it is feasible to do it. I don't know if there'll be the same number of games for every sport, and the NCAA still has to weigh in on if they're going to run championships in the spring. All they've said is they're not going to run championships in the fall, but we're hoping they're going to still run them in the spring. If not, we'll at least crown MAC champions in all those sports.
All right, the spring, it's open-ended. Let's talk football specifically. What would the spring timeline for football work? What would that look like ideally?
Well, it's funny because I had another AD ask me today about, were you guys going to play non-conference games in the spring? And I said, right now we're the only conference in FBS playing in the spring. So the answer is no. We would expect to play 8 games and have a conference championship game. Now, if someone decides that should be 6 later, it'll be 6, because there's a lot of debate about how many can you play and then turn around and play again in 2021 in the fall. I believe you can do up to 8 and maybe 1 or 2 more, but we will have to judge that. Right now, the MAC is planning and hoping to do 8 and have a championship game.
All right, you kind of went to where my next question was going to be. This is being driven by health and safety. Some would look at it and go, okay, if it's being driven by health and safety, we're going to start football, we're going to start this sport, high contact in January, February. We're going to play a full season. That bleeds into spring ball. That bleeds into off-season workouts. Then you go into fall camp. and then you go into the 2021 season. What would you say to someone who says, look, I get it, you're not going to be able to play it this fall, but from a health and safety standpoint, that sport specifically doesn't make sense to basically have 2 seasons in 1 calendar year?
There's no question it's going to be hard on the body of the toll it takes. But I believe these kids are young and they're used to playing multiple sports in high school throughout the year, and dealing with their minor injuries and situations they have. And we'll just have to spend extra time in the training room working with them and try to give them some time off in the summer. Maybe the summer schedule is a little bit looser than it was before, and maybe they can get into camp a little bit later, but still have it be as effective. And so all those things, we'll work with our team doctors and our trainers and the people at Mercy Health we deal with to try to make those decisions.
Each student's individual needs, desires, professional opportunities are different. So I'm asking kind of a broad question that really, I guess, more has an anecdotal answer, but I'll ask it anyway. What would you say to a student athlete who expresses concerns about their eligibility, either based on their inability to play this spring, their unwillingness to play this spring, and just possible, even if we can have this in the spring, possible cancellations of football and the other fall sports that may move to spring but might also not happen this spring?
We've given every kid the opportunity to opt out right now for the whole year. So we have a few that have taken us up on that, not nearly as many as some might expect or you've seen at other schools. And that would go the same for the spring. Now, if we do play a spring of 8 games, my understanding is their eligibility would count for that year. Now, if the kids don't want to or choose not to, we certainly would give them that right, just like we have at this point. So we'll have to see what the NCAA weighs in on that at the end of the day, but that's how we're approaching it right now.
I'm sure you've seen criticism, skeptics, people wondering if this is indeed the right course of action. And look, each conference is sort of doing their own thing right now. You will have people that say, look, the kids in a college football program and in other athletic programs, they're getting regular testing, they're getting monitoring, they're getting cared for, they're getting structure, they're getting academic support. We're not canceling the school year. We're going to have, obviously, ideally, Miami University later this fall has some kids on campus. What would you say to someone who says, look, these kids who are supposed to be playing this fall, they're better off within the structure of a college sports environment for health and safety purposes rather than not having games, not having practices, not having that environment and structure?
And it's a fair question. I am blown away that it keeps coming up, though. They're still going to be here. We're not saying they're not going to be here. They're going to be on campus practicing, and they're going to be lifting and working out, and we're still going to be monitoring them. So I don't have any intention of our kids not being here on campus.
This has been an insane year in college sports for a lot of different reasons, not the least of which there have been institutions that have had to shutter certain sports. This has obviously impacted the MAC. Off the top of my head, Bowling Green has decided to discontinue its baseball program. Where we are right now, how much of that is a concern of yours at Miami University?
We've made the decision we're not going to impact our sports as far as what sports we sponsor and offer to student athletes. There's certainly more that could come down the road for us in terms of challenges with staffing and budgets, and we're going to have to make those decisions based on what the spring does look like. I actually think the spring could monetize into a better situation because, let's face it, no matter if we had played, we were going to have severe limitations on attendance. That was clear. If we can play in the spring and we can have more people, that's more money. ESPN, if they stay a good partner with us, which we believe they will, and they want to televise our games in the spring, the TV contract would still be the same. So we feel like we can monetize the spring just pretty close to as well as we could the fall, and that's going to help our budget situation overall and minimize the impact of having to make some of those tough decisions that other schools have made. I think the crisis has certainly brought some things to bear that were probably evident at some schools, and they've had to deal with those in different ways. I always feel when I took this job, over 7 years ago, I felt like Miami was well positioned to move forward, and the donor support we get is fantastic, and I still think we're going to be able to weather this and not have those drastic impacts here at Miami.
A number of prominent and even less prominent college football players have taken to social media to say, look, we want to play. We want to play this fall. I'm sure you could scour your membership of student athletes and find men and women who want to play sports this fall, obviously within your football program as well. When you hear from those kids who say, look, we get the modern realities, we get what everybody's dealing with here, but we want to play. We don't want to play in the spring. What do you say to them?
that's probably the toughest piece right now is that we do have kids that want to play. There's no doubt about it. And we've had, very good success with our testing. We've had a few positives, but really a very small number. And they've been doing everything the right way. They've been holding each other accountable. They've done everything we've asked. And then we have to tell them on Saturday that we're going to move to the spring. My hope is that if other leagues do the same thing, it's going to be a little bit more understandable for the kids to realize that this wasn't just a MAC thing. This is an everybody thing. We'll see how that plays out over the next 48, hours to a week in terms of other conference decisions. But it is something that I feel terrible about with this decision is telling these kids who've worked so hard and sacrificed so much to make this work and tell them that we're not going to compete this fall. But my full attention is to giving them a valuable opportunity in the spring and what that looks like.
It feels off in the distance. The reality is your winter sports would begin preparations for their season within the next 2 months. Give us an idea of what the league's timeline is going to be for making decisions about sports like basketball.
Yeah, and I think if you really boil it down, what's happening in college football right now, the go no go date was really when pads were going to go on and people were going to start hitting each other. That's really the date that's triggering all this stuff. And if you notice, the SEC bought a few extra weeks by not starting until September 26th, so their camp hitting period doesn't start quite as early as some of the others, and so they've bought themselves a little more time. With basketball, it's kind of like, when are you going to get into really going full on scrimmages and wanting to maybe scrimmage against another, doing that kind of secret game they do, the secret practice game they do before the year starts. The decision's going to be made before that. That's when you're going to have to really get into that. So I'd look at that more being the end of October timeline for them. And certainly right now it's a daunting task to think how that's going to work, and there's likelihood there'll be some kind of delay there, but you just don't know yet.
Did you just acknowledge the secret scrimmage?
Yeah, it's like we played Indiana State a year ago, but no one's allowed to go. Like, even if we're doing it in our building, I can't watch. So, yeah, I don't know exactly what it's called, but I call it the secret scrimmage.
That's fine by me. Answer this for me. You will find skeptics who go, look, the professional leagues in the NBA, Major League Soccer, NHL specifically, they've put their athletes in a bubble, and it's working. You'll find people who say, look, this can happen in college football, but if so, you might have to compromise the model of amateurism. And there are folks who say, look, this is less about health and safety. We are allowing kids back on campus. We are allowing kids back on campus at a number of universities. And those plans, again, they're anecdotal and they're fluid, but we're allowing kids back on campus. You could do a bubble. You could isolate the kids, but you would have to perhaps compromise the NCAA's model of amateurism. And so you'll find folks who think that these decisions, like the one made by the MAC, is more about that than health and safety. What would you say to that?
It's not interested at all in going down that road. It has nothing to do with that. It's all health and safety. Our medical experts really swung us on this decision when we listened to them talk, and they said they wouldn't let their kids play contact sports. That pretty much hit home to our presidents and to us as athletic directors. So it was an easy decision. If we start going down the road of no longer being amateur athletics, I'm pretty sure that Miami is not going to want to be a part of that.
David, I know times like this are tough. I can't imagine what the last 5.5 months have been like for you. I guess we could say that about many fields. I appreciate the time tonight. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you, Mo.
David Sayler is the director of athletics at Miami University. 10 away from 7 o'clock. We jumped right into it. My name's Mo Egger, in for Lance McAllister. So let's sort of set the stage tonight. We've obviously got a lot of questions about what's going to happen in college football, if we're going to have any college football this year, if we should have college football this year. I've got a lot of thoughts on that. We have the Reds coming off a weekend where they win 2 out of 3, but the bullpen continues to be a problem. I've got 2, I guess, ideas. One is I think the Reds are going to go ahead and take. The other, I hope the Reds do. We'll spend a lot of time on that in the 7 o'clock hour as well. And baseball's got a problem. The Cincinnati Reds are enjoying their first off night of the season, non-rain delay off night of the season right now. They play the Royals tomorrow night, and the beginning of a 3-game series against them. They go into this stretch where they play a bunch of games against the Royals and Pirates, who aren't very good, and so maybe the Reds can get closer to 500, get over 500. At the same time, the St. Louis Cardinals, as of today, have played 5 games, and they're not going to play until the end of the week. What do we do if, let's say, the Reds have played 60 games and the St. Louis Cardinals have played, 48 or 50? We'll spend some time on that tonight as well. Plus, the great Ken Anderson's going to be on this show, and we're going to do a real in-depth look at the Bengals. Assuming the NFL does have football this fall, a real good in-depth look at the Bengals, their roster, the offseason, and year one for Joe Burrow. That coming up at 8:35. Phone numbers wide open, 513-749-7000, 1-800-THE-BIG ONE, and a pound 700 free call AT&T, 8 minutes away from 7 o'clock. And the news, Mo Egger for Lance McAllister tonight on 700 WLW.